let's start this thing. So one of the things that's kind of exciting about Video Studio is like it's kind of the full deal in that a lot of the video editing softwares out there don't have the ability to record or screen record. And as we release it, it's becoming more and more capable of doing some more complicated editing that you'd find in a product like Premiere. Or, you know, like basically it's getting to be closer to, in terms of its functionality, you know, more professional grade video editing softwares. But so this is going to be, I guess in this case, it's going to be a very meta experience because we're going to be creating a tutorial on a tutorial. So yeah, but let's just talk about it as we go through. I got my coffee beside me, which is good. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is, well, we open up ACDSee Video Studio for like all of the media that we have falls under this little media panel right here, which we can add more media to at any point. What's really interesting about this panel too is when we go to record, a screen record in this case, which we're about to, you'll notice that any screen recordings will get added to this media panel that appears on the left-hand side here. You can go ahead and add more media by clicking this plus button here and just basically navigating or browsing to the files you're using. I just sort of filled it up with some files, which we probably won't use in this tutorial, but just to give you an idea of how it interacts. Media files in this case too are sort of organized by type. So we have a sound file, in this case some music. We have 2 intro files, which we sort of use regularly to at the beginning of our intros. Oops. I know why I did that. Okay, hold on. Always great when your software crashes right at the very beginning. Yes, I would like to open that up. Okay. So anyway, so we have a variety of different media files, which we're going to be sort of working with. And then we're going to be making a recording for this tutorial. So we're basically ACDSee Video Studio 4 remembers all the old, you know, in the case it basically saves and recovers files if you'd ever lose them, which honestly during the process of like editing any video, like it often comes up. So it's one of those things where you want to be saving regularly as you work through. So there's a lot of inconsistencies with some video files. So anyway, so let's do the very first thing that we were planning on doing. So we have our like some of our media files in here. It's assigned by type in this case. You can sort of switch up the way that it's previewed in this case. But we're going to make a recording. So I'm going to record. And we're going to be recording our screen here, the left-hand screen. So when you go to record something, essentially you're given a couple options. So this is the first thing that we're going to be doing is going to be recording a little bit of an interaction with ACDSee Photo Studio Ultimate. We are not going to need to pick up our microphone, although we can, in this case, also add my voice. So when you're making a tutorial video or something like that, you might be editing and explaining what you're doing at the same time, which I have done for previous workshops, or rather for tutorials in the past. So you could leave something like this on. System audio. System audio is essentially any audio that's being played in the background. So like if you had any music that was playing on your, you know, you say you were like listening to something on YouTube or something like that as you were going through the process of screen recording, well, that would be what this would be picking up. So for the purpose of this tutorial video, I'm going to close system audio. So I'm going to turn this off so we're not picking that up. We don't need a microphone, so I'm going to turn that off as well. And we don't need to pick up any webcam. So really what we're recording then in this case is our screen dimension. Let's adjust it slightly. So I want to do a custom dimension. And the reason why is it's probably something you can see through the webinar software. But we don't want to actually incorporate any of these sort of buttons that are at the bottom. We just want to incorporate sort of the major playing field for Ultimate. So what I'm going to do is I could either drag this sort of baseline up, which is this red dotted line here. that will indicate what is going to be recorded. So everything within that is recorded. Anything on the outside of it isn't recorded. So I'm going to move it pretty close to here, which is where that black line is. And I'm just going to adjust it. So let's see here. We want height slightly higher. So it looks like it's very close to 2100. So this is a 4K resolution. So it'd be 3840 by a rather high resolution with 2100 in terms of the height and width. So like I mentioned previously, this is going to be the screen or the space that we were going to be recording. And then I'm just going to hit record, and hopefully this isn't going to slow things down too much, because we're running a webinar software, running a recording software, and we're also going to be editing an image at the same time. But so let's hit record, and it basically tells you that in 4 seconds it's going to start recording, and then here we are. So there's a couple notes that we can make in regards to basically one of the telltale signs that we are in fact recording. Which is good to note, is at the base of our screen here, what you might notice is 2 green dots that occur in the bottom left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner. This is just an indication of the space above it is being recorded. So it's just a kind of like a note in this case. It's saying, oh, this is being recorded, which is our screen right now. So let's just go into a video and make a very quick change. So why don't we go into this landscape folder? We will pick a photo. Let's go with, we're going to make just a series of lighting adjustments. Let's make lighting adjustments to this tree image here. So again, we're using Video Studio 4 to edit me editing an image, which is kind of silly, but this is what we're doing. So this would be, again, like very similar to what I do with all my tutorial videos, is I sort of record them and I put them together in post. So we have our image here. It's a nice image. However, it lacks contrast. So we're going to do some contrast adjustments to this image. I'm going to go to select. I'm going to go to, in this case, luminosity selection. And with that luminosity selection active, I'm going to make an adjustment layer. So we're going to go down to vibrance. And it's going to create a mask that appears on the top right-hand corner. And we're going to adjust the saturation. In fact, actually might even adjust the vibrance slightly. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to make a, let's see here, a curves adjustment. Yeah, let's make a curves adjustment, which pops up right there. We're going to click the vibrance mask. I'm going to actually copy this mask, and then I'm going to paste that mask onto my curves adjustment, and then I'm going to invert it so that it's utilizing the tree space instead of the sky space. And I'm going to adjust the curve. So I'm going to darken that space. Let's take a quick look at the before and after. So we have our original image and then our adjusted image. There you are. So I'm happy with that change. So this would be where I'd stop recording. So I'm going to go back to my recorder here, bring it onto my main screen. And then, so we have about 2 minutes of footage as it's ticking up right now. I'm going to pause the footage so we stop recording. And then I'm going to hit the little save icon, which appears on the right-hand side there. And we're going to save this. Let's just, for the purpose of this video, let's just save it to my desktop. I'm going to call this tree curves. And I will save down this MP4, and this shouldn't take very long. So let's take a look at our desktop. It's been saved, and that's good. So I'm going to close the recorder, and let's open up that image. Maybe now we can, well, let's minimize Ultimate. We might need it again, so minimize that. Open up Video Studio 4. And it appears as though our tree curves MP4 has actually been added to our media pile. So let's move that on here, and hopefully we don't have any issues. Do we want to match the settings to your media? Yeah, so let's match that. What this means is, as you can see right up here, well, what we've functionally done here is we've moved a media file onto our track right here, our first track listing, so that we can go about editing that file. And then it gives us obviously a timeline of the length of that clip, which it appears is just over 2 minutes and 40 seconds, very similar to what we experienced when we were recording it. And now it's asking me a question. And that question is, the resolution of your media does not match the current project settings. Do you want to change the project settings to match your media? I don't think I do. So what it's asking here is, you'll notice that up on the top right-hand corner, or actually rather just above the preview section, there's our resolution, which is 1920 by 1080, which is considered to be like 1080p in this case. That is our project resolution. Now, the resolution of the media that we took is closer to 3840 by something, whatever, 3840 by whatever, which means that the resolution is actually quite a bit larger than the media that we have right here. So, so we could match the project resolution, which would change this number up top here to 3840 by about whatever, or we could just say no to this and it will place it at the resolution of the current file. So let's do that. Just make sure that. Yeah, so let's not change the settings. So let's hit no, and then it'll place it, which is great. And then we can go through the process of scrubbing through our file and seeing that this represents the experience of what we just created. Okay, so there's a lot of this file that we're going to need to sort of cut because it's basically head up space or leading time and foot time where like nothing occurs. Like as soon as this media pop up right there, like that's at the point where we're kind of done with this file and we're just wanting to cut it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of trim this file down to where the actual meat of the effects takes place. Okay. So let's have a look at that. So, so we have our media file here. I'm going to scrub to the first point, or actually let's play through and let's decide where we want to make our first indentation or slice into this file. So we're going to play it. And I think we're looking at about, if we scrub through a little bit, once we decided on an image, which was this tree one, and then we brought it into edit mode, let's start actually here. This is perfect. So we're going to start cutting this file around here. So what I'm going to do is I have my marker set to the time period in my, my tree curves image here, which I want to cut. I'm going to then just select the media. And you'll notice the media selected where there's this yellow box that appears around the edge. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to hit split. And then so that creates a new media file starting with the time of the area where we cut our media file. So what that does is enables us to get rid of this first tree curves, which doesn't contain any media in this case that we want to emphasize. So I'm just going to click on that and I'm going to hit delete and it removes it. Interestingly, what's cool about splitting media files in this case is just though we may have essentially removed the first part of this file, if we were to take it and expand it, it will remember content that occurred prior to the point that we split that file. So you notice that this scrolling through our project files, etc., up to the point that we clicked on the tree, well, all of this was is what we split before. But whenever we go about sort of taking our file here, like this curves file right here, and then expanding it using the timeline track, well, that's going to get back essentially, or get back the content as we expand it larger than the cut space. So, okay, so we have the first section of it cut that we starts roughly where we want it to start, which is right there. Let's go through the process of finding where we want to end the clip. So I'm going to go through that clip, and I'm going to find right about, yeah. So right when I sort of finish editing about here, that's where we want to end this experience. So once again, the clip is selected. The sort of the point here is assigned right there, and then I'm going to playhead is the word I'm looking for, and then I'm going to split it there. So that will enable us to cut down our file, and then we've sort of trimmed it, and so we know that all of the content that is that we're going to experience in here is good content. That's the stuff that we're going to focus on in our quotation marks, a very meta, editing experience. Then what I'm going to do, and this is just good habit to get into, is to move this curves file back to the very beginning of our track listing. So if we massively expand our listing, we can sort of focus in on the very, very particular detail of an individual, frame or a couple seconds of a file, which is going to come in handy later. But for the purpose of just seeing the whole of our media, I might reduce the size of the whole timeline so that we can see that our initial clip here is just 1 minute and 43 seconds long. So yeah, so that places it there. Okay, so I think that if we wanted to sort of transition into this file, there'd be a couple things that we'd want to do here now that we've sort of placed our media. We're going to make some transition effects and that sort of thing to this file, but the first thing I like to do when I have media set, without making any changes, I'm just going to add a couple tracks here. So to add, right now we just have track 2 and track 1. If we click add track, it's going to add a track 3 here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move my curves to track 3, and then I'm going to designate track 2 to, let's say, this music file. Okay. So we have now a music background file to this tree curves movie media here. So if we're going to play both, then it would play in this case both the curves file, which is our visual file, as well as our audio file, which is in this case the song that we've placed beneath it. Most songs are going to be placed at 100% volume, or rather 0 decibels, and that's going to be far too loud for our tutorial in this case. So what we're going to do is we're going to dramatically reduce the volume of the song, in this case, the song file. And the reason why is because we may want to place our own audio over top of it, with me perhaps explaining what we're doing in this tree curves video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and I think what I'm going to do is take this slider. Let's see here. Add audio point. If you add an audio point, as you can see here, you can sort of designate how loud you want the file to be. So we're just going to reduce it to, say, 35% across the board, which is much, much, much lower than what we had before, which was quite a bit louder. So with that being said, I actually might move this down to track 1 because I don't intend to interact with this file very often. And if that's the case, I might as well just lock it, actually, because I might not be working with this file at all, in which case there's no sense me accidentally clicking on one of those points and accidentally re-raising those audio files or something like that. So I'm just going to lock that file. It's now locked and means I can't add or interact with this field at all, which is good. We want that. We don't necessarily want to be adjusting this file. Our main focus in this case will actually be this tree curves file. Okay, the second thing, which I'm not going to illustrate here because we don't need to, but if I wanted to, once I had sort of edited down this file, I'm happy with it. What I could do is start the playhead and then go through the process of the audio recorder, which in this case, what it would do is I could record my audio as the video is playing, and that enables me to sort of time my thoughts or my recorded audio to that of the clip that we're creating. This is very functionally similar to that of when you were going to record your actual screen to record that and then place it at the same time. It's not necessary here. We're not going to record in addition to editing our video, but just so we're understanding how this works, what it can do, we can very easily go through the process of editing that and recording at the same time. I'm just going to save my project. Let's do the desktop is fine. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start exploring some of the features that we have with the sort of major focus of the feature that I want to talk about, which is keyframing. So let's go into keyframing first before we add any transitions or that sort of thing. So during the process of this screen recording of me making this curves adjustment, there's a couple points where we're going to want to maybe zoom in for the ease of the purpose of those who are going to be watching this tutorial video. So if you're watching a tutorial video, you don't want to just see the whole thing experienced like this, because it isn't very clear necessarily what you're focusing on. So the very first thing we did in this video was make a pixel, or rather a luminosity selection. So what I might do is now I'm going to expand the content of my timeline, because we're going to need to get more, we're going to need to make more precision changes. So let's find that point where I make a pixel selection, which is right here. Okay, I'm just going to dial this back right here. Select my curves file, and then I'm going to split right here, and I'm going to split at the end of my luminosity selection, which is right about here approximately. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to just pull this media over to the right because we don't need it right now. We just want to be interacting with this media. And what we want to be doing is we're going to make a keyframe adjustment that zooms in to this section of the UI, which is this, or rather the graphic user interface, which is that luminosity selection right there. Easier to show than explain, so let's just go ahead and go to our animations. And then I'm going to add a custom animation to this file. And you'll see that what that does is it adds a little arrow to that file. And we're going to be interacting with this arrow. This is very important. So I just simply took my custom animation, dragged it onto the media file I'm working with. You'll notice that previously I've split this media. So while this media file has an arrow, the other media files that I split it from do not. So it's treating this media file, in this case, as a unique unit, which is good. This is important. So let's go ahead and let's zoom in at the point where I open up the select dropdown. So open up the select dropdown right there. Cool. So what I'm going to do, this is perfect. I'm going to keep my arrow at about yay. I might increase it slightly. And then everything that appears after the arrow, right after this red point, this is what I want to zoom in on. Well, how do I zoom in? That doesn't make necessarily a lot of sense. Well, it's actually quite simple. All we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our arrow is selected, and then we're going to physically make this media larger. So I'm going to increase the size of my media and place it where I want to see that media. And at some certain point, I might think, oh, okay, well, I actually want to zoom out further. So I'm going to zoom out to, say, 55%. That's helpful. And then I'm just going to zoom in like this. And then that's much clearer now what the subject of my interest is in this case. So let's see how this interacts with this file. So let's play this file. Okay, so it's full display, and then, it zooms in right there. Here's a couple notes. So what's being shown in the background here is really important. When we go to export this file, like when we go to produce and share this final file, this background here is not going to be displayed in our media file. That is the MP4 file or whatever that we utilize in order to produce this this movie. So, but what it does indicate is that there is more content here for the purpose of editing. So let's zoom out again. What I'm going to do is, I'm happy with this. I'm happy with the fact that that part of the media file is zoomed in. I'm just going to place that back here, and I'm going to move this guy back, and then let's just play this whole experience like that. Zoom in again to fit, and let's see what this experience is like with that animation in place. So here we are, we're going through, and then we're going to navigate up to the select panel, and then we're going to zoom in, and we're going to select luminosity selection, and it's going to select that luminosity, and then at the end of this clip, boom, back out. And so it's going to go back out right at the end of my clip that's been adjusted right here, my second clip, and at the beginning of my first clip, or my third clip rather, here. So the experience of that for the viewer in this case would be to view the image, see that we want to zoom into a specific portion of it, right? And then when the experience of that selection is over, then it's going to zoom out. Okay, so the really important thing in this case about custom animations is whatever you do to that space, whatever you add or move or however you interact with that space, well, it's going to be applying that adjustment after, or up to, rather, leading up to the experience of that adjustment. So a good way of looking at it, let's zoom in again. Zoom way in. Okay, so we know that at the start of this clip, what's going to happen is we're going to see this clip normally, and then when the arrow begins right here, right, then we know that what's going to occur is going to lead up to the final experience here of us being fully zoomed in. If I was to take this arrow and really drag it so it almost lasts the entire length of the clip, that experience of being zoomed in is going to take a lot longer. It's going to be slower, right? Because the arrow in this case is a lot longer. So let's experience that just to be clear. So we're going to be watching the tree, and then we're zooming in, but it's a much slower zoom in than what we had. And then it's going to be finished. That custom animation is finished here. And then it's going to pop back to our next, the next clip here with its own set animations. So when we go through that experience of zooming in from 0, I guess, to 100 is made incrementally in the place of this arrow. So this is like, if this is 0 and this is 100, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, you know what I mean? So it goes through and it makes that animation change for you. This is a keyframe. So this interaction, this custom animation that we've created is a keyframe. Yeah, and this is going to be super handy. And in terms of making, you could move entire sections of your image off the screen. But how I often use these sort of things is I use them from a standpoint of zooming into specific aspects or zooming out of specific aspects of the media to experience it differently, to make sure that we get the point across. So, okay. So that's great, Adam. You have this single point in the media where you've zoomed in. Is there any other points where you want to emphasize things? Well, there is a section here where we go and we add a vibrance adjustment. We edit, or rather, we edit the saturation. And then we go ahead and we edit the vibrance. So what we may do is do the exact same thing here, which is create another keyframe. So now we're going to split our media once again and end it when we have finalized this adjustment, which is about yay, and split our media once again. In this case, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add that custom animation again. to the section. We'll zoom in on our timeline so we can see more of that section. And we will increase the size of this arrow. Or actually, no, let's keep it a short one, just like we did previously. And let's make the decision to, again, increase this section of the media, which is right here. And I'm going to zoom out and pull that section up like that. That's perfect. That's further emphasizing what we're doing right here. I mean, we can move this off the screen or put it in the center here if we wanted to. The media doesn't necessarily need to always be tucked into this, the corners of something. It's just for the purpose of seeing will be no media behind that. And the reason why is because we have not placed any content beneath it. So what we could do to illustrate content that would exist beneath it would be to place a single file behind it. And then you'd see that when we go through the experience of this media, we would see the background be taken up by, so it's going to go to zoom in right now, and it's going to move the media to the center. Well, then we'll see that in the background here. So if we had placed a track underneath of it, which in this case we talked about earlier being occupied by a personal audio recording of the experience, right? Me explaining, oh, well, this is what I'm doing right now, blah, blah, blah. But this also could be another media image track, or it could be a photo, or it could be another sort of music file, etc. But what this indicates, and what's really important, which obviously this isn't ideal. We don't want a cityscape behind our, our illustration of what we're experiencing here. But what this indicates is that when the space is not occupied, right? Our first media file, tree curves media file here, it's all the way over in the corner here with the very, very corner ending up in this section. What this indicates is that layer order, in this case media order, especially when it comes to visual media like photography and video clips, does matter. So it takes up a portion of the space that we're seeing, the space that we're seeing being 1920 by 1080, and it occupies that space. And in fact, actually, it occupies that space exactly. So this media file is 1920 by 1080. If we could move this, we could move that media file off screen, right? And then we wouldn't see it, but there's no purpose of having this media off screen when we're not going to be rendering it. So what I'm simply going to do is I'm just going to delete that. But what that should give you in this case is an indication of what this experience would look like in the background. Currently, the default background is going to be set to black. So let's go back to the beginning of this and I just experience this particular custom animation. And as we go in, we zoom, we're looking at just the vibrant section, wonderful. And at a certain point, this is going to be complete once I am done adjusting those vibrance things. And we're gonna go, boom, back out to the original now that we're done with those adjustment layers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna then set the screen to fit again because we don't need to see it that small. And that's already, we've edited a portion of our media here. So we've added 2 custom animations. We've added a media track that would be in the background to all of this, right? And I mean, we're gonna have another look. There's probably one more thing we want to adjust as it goes later on. Let's just save this. Let's make one more custom animation, then let's take a look at some of the transitions too. Because right now what we've had in here is hard stop transitions, but there's softer transitions that we can use to enlighten this experience, make this experience a little less aggressive, right? In fact, actually a good place to begin the transition, right, would be the clicking on this tree image and then hitting the edit button and then moving into the edit suite itself, right? So what I mean by that is let's zoom in again. And then let's decide at what point are we really transitioning to another mode. Well, you know what? This little experience actually takes a bit of time. So let's actually cut that out, and then let's add a transition so that the experience seems more smooth. So it appears that my mouse cursor hits the edit button right there, about yay. So I'm going to cut that. And then when is the edit mode finally open? Like, when does it open here? Let's see, scrub through, scrub through, scrub through. Okay, it's thinking. Okay, now keep in mind, this is like a tenth of this, or rather, yeah, like it's been dramatically slowed down because we're scrubbing through only portions of it. Okay, and so it occurs right there that we're in edit mode. So right there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove these two, or rather we're gonna set a split it, and we're gonna cut this middle section out, and we're going to adjust our overall media to make sure that it's lines up. So right now we got this pretty massive space in the middle of our media that if we were to play it, it's just gonna be dead air. So it's just gonna go to black because there's no media that's active and present either on track 3 or track 2 where our media could live. So what we need to do is then we need to select all of our media and just glide it over to lock with the next media, which you'll notice that it sits right there and a little blue line comes up showing that it's snug and tight sitting to the next media. So then what we're going to do is we're going to add a nice transition in between these two files. So to do so, I'm going to navigate to our transitions up on the top left-hand corner, and we're going to find one that would be appropriate for this change. I traditionally use like pretty much, well, I come from a video editing background and a radio editing background. And the only transitions we tended to use, especially when it comes to video, especially when it comes to news and that sort of thing, would be subtle fades, fading to black, and then optionally at sometimes fading to white. So these are the ones that are the most common. There's a lot of different animations in here, some of which are like functional, like sliding to the right of something, versus like some of them which are more decorative, like checkerboard or skewing. But just for my sense of working in media, or rather news and news production, I'm just going to use a simple fade to black. So when I click on this transition, what is a transition? Well, a transition in this case exists between two things. You're transitioning from one thing to another. So when I go to place this file, it's going to want me to place it between or at the beginnings or ends of files. So you'll notice that when I've suggested it, when I've clicked on it, it's suggesting locations where this transition could live, which is actually awesome. Not all media, or not all video production softwares will give you this intuitive of an experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place that fade to black in between my first and my tree curves here. And the reason why is because I want to fade from my manage mode to my edit mode. I want that experience to seem less jarring. And fades and transitions help to reduce the experience of a jarring transition. So let's play it back with a black fade now applied. So we're going through, and then we're selecting that file, and we're bringing it into edit mode, all the while experiencing a transition as it occurs. The only thing I would suggest is the transition is quite long. We can adjust this. So the transition placed between 1 and 2, let's again zoom in and scrub to where it's located. And let's take the pin ends of our transition and just dial them in. You'll notice that I'm reducing the length of the transition. I can delete a transition by right-clicking on it and clicking delete. I'm just going to play back and watch that transition, and that transition is much faster now. It's actually almost too fast. I'm going to dial it out a little bit. And let's watch this thing again. So going from manage mode and clicking on the edit button and going into edit mode. So that's a pretty good transition. I'm happy with that. So let's zoom out and have a look. So you'll notice that my transition, the yellow transition, occurs right there. So I know that I've placed a transition there. I know that I've placed a custom animation, keyframe in here. and another keyframe in here. Okay, so transitions are nice. Let's maybe talk about a couple behaviors that we could add at the beginning of a media file, and maybe make one more custom animation. And that's maybe dedicated right here. Yeah, to when I copy and paste a mask. That's a good location for another, maybe a zoom in, given that this again is sort of reacting like a tutorial. Also, I'm just going to sort of open the floor because I've been talking for a bit. Is there any questions so far? Are we happy with what's going on right now? Anyway, if you do have a question, just fire it in the Q&A panel and I'll get to it. But so I'm going to set that one point right here. Let's see here. So we place our curves adjustment. Good. And then we need to decide, yeah, perfect. So we're going to start our next split right here. I'm going to, this is good because I'm about to copy the vibrance adjustment and apply it to the curves. I want to illustrate that to my viewers. So I'm going to copy, or cut right there rather. I'm going to, copy that. And then I'm going to paste the mask right there, as I can see. And wonderful, that's done. So that's where I would end that experience, that custom animation. Let's go ahead and save. Have some coffee. And then let's click right here and add that custom animation again. So we'll go to our Add Advanced Effects. We will, let's say, or rather, animations, add a custom animation. And let's expand that slightly. And then what we want, we want to zoom in on that section of the, so I'm going to take what exists after the animation, and this is what we're leading up to in this case. Reduce the size of the media board, zoom right in. Maybe I'll place it sort of right there, sort of in the middle on the thirds line, as it were. And then let's experience from beginning to end. It's going to zoom in, start zooming in here. Great. We're going to copy, and then we're going to paste. And paste as a mask, awesome. And then that's going to be the end of that experience. And I think the rest is just adjusting the curves itself, which is fine. We've already illustrated that, so we're not going to re-illustrate it for this. What we might do, though, is we might close off this last clip, and in this case, our little tutorial video, with another transition. We might end the transition with, in this case, a fade to black. And maybe this would exist before some sort of media file that would be like an intro or an outro. If I wanted to add a little, a little webcam experience of me, let's do it actually. Let's do a, let's add a transition. I'll add that fade to black just at the very end there. I might lengthen that fade to black just so it's slightly longer. So let's see how that would experience. Cool. All right. And then maybe what we do is we add a little recording at the end with a webcam recording of me saying like, what would be screen recording plus webcam, or just the webcam? There we go. So it'd be like something to the degree of, thanks for watching my video, guys. As I did this tutorial of the custom animations using pixel targeting and curves, like, thanks again. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. And then that would be the end of my recording. So let's save that file, and we'll just also place it on the desktop. We'll just call it face detection and save. And then what we'll do is we'll add that to our media file as well. Let's go back into our media, and it'll be a little tiny camera. See if I can maybe adjust the size of the camera because that's a bit short, but you might get the point. Let's see here. Let's see what the settings are for the video recorder. Tools, options, webcam. Webcam settings, position. Oh, so you could like dramatically increase the size and set it in the center. That would make more sense. So, but point proven, but we could make the webcam quite a bit larger than it is right now, up to 50% it appears. But let's say we did that, for example, and then we would go through the process of placing it right there, or whatever, at the very end of our video. This would be like our little, final experience before we'd sign off. So there's a little transition, cut to a much bigger version of my face as I'm saying like, hey, thanks guys, I appreciate you watching my video, blah, blah, blah. And then maybe we cut this off a little bit before the end. That would be good right here. And we'll cut that media right there. Or actually, I don't want to cut it. I want to split it. So I'll split it right there. And I'll cut the little nub off the end there. And so we have our little sign off at the end. And let's look to get a transition for the beginning. Or maybe a behavior would be nice. So we haven't talked about behaviors. We've talked about custom animations. We've talked about a variety of different just editing functionalities. So the very first thing I maybe want to do is, okay, we don't have a lot of lead up time before we're like right into the product. So maybe what I want to do is have just a still frame that we're going to have, and then apply a sort of a animation, or rather a behavior into that to sort of start off the experience of our media. So that probably doesn't mean a lot, but let's sort of show you what I mean. So I'm going to scrub to the very beginning of my experience here, which is in manage mode here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a snapshot of that experience. So a snapshot is literally just a still image of what we're seeing on the preview section of of our media. So it would be this exact screen. So I'm going to take a snapshot right there. It's been saved to wherever we are interacting with this project file. And let's find it here. So it should snapshot 0. So we're going to add that in. I'm going to place it onto our media. We're just going to faux add it into the 4th slot. I'm actually going to slide it down into the 3rd track and then readjust our media. So what we can do is, our snapshot in this case isn't really a video file. It's just an image in this case that's been added to the beginning of our media. And as we watch our timeline, you'll notice that my mouse in this case doesn't move because it's just a photo until the portion where, there we go, we start to see the media again. The reason why we want to add this still frame is because, well, there might be some talk lead up to the beginning of this. Like I might be like saying like, hey guys, welcome to my video, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about, pixel targeting today. So we might need a little bit of lead up time before we get into the bulk of what we're discussing. In that bulk, we might utilize things like our actual clipped media and that sort of thing. But for the purpose of just a quick entry point, this snapshot is going to be very useful to this experience. But the other reason why we have our snapshot is because we want to make a behavioral entry into the experience of this media. So I'm going to go up to our filter panel here. I'm going to go to behaviors, and let's find a behavior that would make sense for this this video. Why don't we do a fade and left slide in? So behaviors sort of work like animations. They're kind of like, think of them as sort of set already pre-recorded animations that have been made by ACDSee to help you sort of with your experience. Behaviors also have like 3 sections. In this case, we're only going to care about behavior in, but we're going to explain behavior in, during, and out. So I'm just going to take this one behavior and I'm going to place it over top of my snapshot rather. And you'll notice as I do so, there's like these 3 dots that appear in the sort of previews of the timeline. Let's reduce the size of the timeline. Oh, that's as low as we can go. Okay, that's fine. Let's expand it then. So if I was to add, so in this case, let's play back and we'll experience our behavior. Our behavior is our media sliding in, boom, sitting in the center. But we might have more than that. Like if we have a much longer clip, we might, like this clip right here, we might want like a behavior of it moving in. So let's say, let's add a vertical expansion into this and then we'll add, let's ignore during, and let's go back to out. Maybe there's a vertical expansion as well. Vertical shrink out, yeah. So we'll add those. And you'll notice that the first and last slide of the behavior section down at the bottom, this little properties thing, is indicated by this little preview panel. So if we go over and we open up our properties and we're selecting the curves, you'll notice that we have a little section dedicated to behaviors. So in ACDSee, a lot of your filters, your animations, your overlays, your effects, that sort of thing, all have properties. The media itself also has properties. For example, the media has blend modes, it has opacity adjustments that we could make to this media. It has a rotations, so you can rotate it on a Z-axis, a Y-axis, and an X-axis. And you can also just adjust its position. And then it also lists the media width and dimensions, which in this case make a lot of sense. The width is 1920, so full width, and the height is 1050. Well, normally it would be 1080, but I believe when we were going through the recording process, we recorded a little less at the bottom. And the reason why is because we didn't want to get this type to search bar with our like Windows bar in the media. So we got rid of that. And that's why we've adjusted the height to 1050 or 1050 instead of 1080. But we're looking at behaviors. So let's take a look at our in behavior. So our in behavior is vertical expand in, which looks something like this. Boom, vertical expand in. And the movement is, in this case, linear. We could adjust the movement if we wanted to. And then the speed is seemingly slow. Let's see what it is at 89%. It's maybe quite a bit faster. Oh, it's almost too fast. It's almost something you can't see at all. So let's adjust to like 42%. See what that looks like. Yeah, okay. So it's quite a bit quicker, but it's still, the speed is 42% instead of 30 or whatever it was. So now if we're looking at our during behaviors, we don't have any listed. We could add it to this via this panel, or we could add it during the during panel in the sort of the center of this behaviors on the left here. And then let's have a look at our out panel. So our out panel is vertical shrink out. The movement is once again linear. And let's say we want to match the speed to that of our in, which is 42. So I'm just going to copy, that seemed to adjust it accidentally. Let's copy the 42 and let's apply the 42 to the speed here, which we could have just typed it in, but that's fast too. And then let's experience that media. Keeping in mind too that there's two things that are going to be occurring. So there's our vertical shrink in. We're going to experience our media. We're going to go over to the right-hand side here, and we're going to adjust the curves. What we're also going to be experiencing is at the end of this, there's going to be two things. There's going to be a fade to black and a vertical shrink out. So let's see how those two things interact. So we've just applied our curves. We're talking about how good that looks. We're showing the saved, unhiding it. Man, that's a really nice change. So we're going to go to the end of our media. We'll be experiencing the fade. Ooh, the fade is much slower than the vertical shrink. So let's see how this interacts together. There's the vertical shrink and the fade together. It's just in this case, the fade was much slower than the vertical shrink in terms of speed. So you saw the fade way before the vertical shrink when applied. So in this case, we might decide, well, actually, I don't necessarily want to fade out. Maybe I want the fade out on a different media file or something like that. So instead, I delete it there, and I add that transition, that fade to black at the end of my little sign-off section. So I could go ahead and move it. All I did to delete it was just simply right-click it, and you can right-click and delete it from there. The actual behavior itself isn't indicated on the file. It's only indicated in the properties section, unlike that of the transition, which can be adjusted here. The behaviors need to be adjusted from the properties panel. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. So let's take a look at our first one. So our first one is just a behavior slide in from the left. sits there, and that would be the way that we would start our section off. Now, we don't necessarily need to add a during behavior or an end behavior. In this case, we can have one of three versus having two of three, however you like to do it. But like I said, behaviors are sort of like pre-made, kind of like default custom animations that are worth noting. Okay, so let's see what else we can talk about. I mean, there's more things to talk about in terms of like filters and overlays, but I'm not sure if I want to filter an overlay in this tutorial video. Maybe it's just good enough that I could show you sort of how they look and less about like actually using them for this video. Overlays themselves are a series of like set sort of animations, or rather mini movies that you can add to your timeline. These don't make a lot of sense for mine in that, like, okay, well, I don't necessarily need an overlay for a tutorial video, but if I like wanted to get really cute with it and I was like, hey, I really like my change that I made here in this one section where I was like really happy with it, I could add this sort of cute little overlay of the hearts popping up. And there you go. You know, it's like I was really happy with it, so maybe that little touch is nice. Overlays are kind of like really, really, like I said, they're mini animations. They often are quite bold, and they might make more sense for sort of like vlogging videos or something like that than they necessarily would for a tutorial video. Again, there's tons of different ways that you could utilize these things. It's just maybe they're not appropriate for my media. So I'm going to delete this heart overlay where I was really into the color of that photo. Yeah. And the last thing is filters, and filters can be used in pretty much every aspect. So a lot of these filters are sort of like proprietary. Light EQ is a really good example. So Light EQ is actually a tool that we utilize in ACDSee. In the photo studio products, we ported it to our Video Studio 4. So maybe we will use something like that to have a look at the lighting for, actually let's maybe add it to the very last file where, you know, maybe in this case where my face came up, like I actually wanted to adjust the lighting because it was just too raw for that image. But Light EQ, when you add a filter, it's going to pop up on the right-hand corner on our properties panel, which again can be sort of hidden or brought up at any point. And then you can darken it or lighten it as you see fit. So you're just adding a filter to that section. Let's really darken it. See what happens. Yeah. So you're gonna like really adjust the light on this one section. If you ever wanted to remove Light EQ, you could remove Light EQ from the filters, layers, or transitions by right-clicking on it. There's more options. You can also adjust the clip speed, which is really useful because sometimes you want the clip speed to be like twice as slow. Maybe that's to accommodate for your audio. Maybe that's because what you're doing is really complicated and you want to slow it down. So if you add clip speed, it will add it right here. And then we could slow this file down. So how long do we want this file to be? We want it to be, I think by putting 2 here, we will make it twice as long. Or no, we've made it twice as short. So what we want to do is do 50 or 0.50. So then we've made it twice as long versus the initial speed, which was of course 1. So you can also just enter in values if you want this to be, you know, right now it's 24 seconds long. If you want it to be 15 seconds long, you could just adjust the seconds right there, and it would correspondingly either speed it up or slow it down according to your input. So in this case, we've made, I'd be like talking like this in that section, but yeah. So that's sort of like a pretty broad overview. Let's take a look at, there's some other things that maybe we want to talk about. So we talked about animations, we talked about behaviors, we talked about overlays shortly, we talked about filters, we talked about my favorite advanced effect, which is that. Oh, there's a couple things that are worth noting. I'm not gonna, yeah, let's do that right now, actually. We've talked about GIF snapshots, and we'll talk about GIFs in a second. But so the reason what I wanted to focus on here is I really wanted to emphasize like how you could use the software to create something like a tutorial, which I do all the time, and I use ACDSee Video Studio 4. But there's also some things that, like I said, like with the overlays that aren't necessarily perfect for something like a it isn't necessarily perfect for something like a tutorial video, but it does have uses in other mediums. So what I really wanted to do here is sort of first and foremost show you how you could make a tutorial with Video Studio 4, and secondarily show you some of the new features that have just been introduced in Video Studio 4, which, like something like the custom animations, is just mind-blowing. It's awesome. I'm going to save my project. Anyone who's ever edited video knows how important that is. And then let's talk about chroma key and color LUTs. So we've talked about audio recorder, we've talked about transitions, we've talked about audio effects, or rather we've talked about animations, we've talked about behaviors, filters, and then overlays, but we haven't really touched on advanced effects. So let's do that. So the two that are going to be the most important, we did already talk about clip speed because we slowed down the last one. This is sort of how you could quickly add clip speed. You can also add it by right-clicking on it, but you can add it from the advanced effects panel as well. Color LUTs is awesome. So color LUTs is, LUTs in this case it's a sort of like a port over from movie making that we've used in Photo Studio and Video Studio. Color LUTs are, they're called lookup tables. And what they do is they often interact as like a custom overlay that has been created for film. Historically, how they were used in film was that certain film reels, like companies that made actual reels of film, because they had different methods for creating that film, they had very different appearances. Some were warmer, some were cooler, some had like a, certain areas of sharpness that others didn't. So as film became digitized, and the need for physical film reel became almost non-existent, a lot of people have been making custom LUTs, so lookup tables, that replicate the appearance of historical film. And all they really are is just like overlays. They're filter overlays, but they often have a really beautiful appearance. So that's just, I don't know, I guess a quick history on LUTs, but also why we would use them in film in this case, or in creation of tutorial videos, is you could pretty much dramatically change the way that these images look like with them. So I've gone ahead and I've dragged and dropped color LUTs onto, I don't know, the second portion of my image here. And if I select a LUT from the dropdown, let's see here. Oh, I must need to load some LUTs onto my computer. Okay, so I can't really illustrate that right now because I don't have them loaded. But you can download LUTs anywhere on the internet. There's a ton of them. And then what you would do is you would basically select from that drop down, and it would apply the effect that the LUT was trying to illustrate. Yeah, you can get LUTs all over the place. If you just look up free for commercial LUTs or like free LUTs, you'll see tons of websites that will have them, and then you can load them from here. So instead of that, let's focus on remove color. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on my media. But that's just a brief history of LUTs and sort of how they would be operational within the software. So remove color. This is not going to be a great illustration of this, but remove color is green screening. That's literally all it is. Green screening is more modernly referred to as chroma key. Green screening is kind of old school, but most people know of green screening when I say it, so that's why I mention it. When you add remove color to your media, it's going to pop up right over here in the remove color section. So this is a really obvious example of, I think, a portion of my media when it goes like bright pink. So if we wanted to, we could remove that pink color, and it would create a transparency in that area where we could then have other media behind it. Let's see how good this works. Remove color, or rather chroma key, is really useful when you have an isolated subject. So for example, in the image of our cat here that we have for the preview panel, in this case, you could remove the green in the background by selecting the green from the background, and then the image of the cat afterwards is super clean and doesn't have that green color in the background. So the way that chroma key is often used is to sort of take a hard color that is behind your subject, like white is a bad example, but if you had like blue or green or something like that, you would be able to take out that color from your from the whole, in this case, area where that effect had been applied. Okay, enough talk. So remove color. I don't want to remove green. I want to eyedropper and remove pink. Okay, so that makes sense. So again, this isn't really a great example because there's so many variations of pink within this image. But for all intents and purposes, we've removed some pink here. It's just not a very clean looking. Let's apply a video beneath our file here, and you'll see why this matters. There you go. So in this case, if we were to play this image, it's going to be the boat in the background with the trees and the people walking, and then we've removed that one specific variation of pink from the image. Again, the really important thing to remember here is when you're using chroma key, removing or rather adding colors to your media, just make sure that they're bold and they're consistent in color. Because there's so many variations of pink, it can't possibly pick up all the different variations of pink. And that's why you have this outlining occurring on this image. But anyway, that illustrates to it. So as we were to play through this image, you would see that up to the point that that had been removed, about, let's watch it, about yay, where we were finished with the pink part. There we go. It then disappears. So it's the same media file. It is the same remove color of pink, but it's just that during this period here, there was a differentiation where we were making that selection and where that pink disappeared. So that is only sort of affecting roughly maybe 30% or rather 70% of this clip. And then where the sort of pink selection process ends after pixel selection is done, then it's going to be just illustrating the normal colors of this image. So again, not necessarily the perfect subject matter for remove color, but the point is very simple. If you want to remove a color from an entire clip, like blue, if you wanted to remove like someone's ball cap or something like that, then that would be the way that you go about doing that. Often how this is used, yes. So David, you can. Let's see how much it affects it. So yeah, as you can see here under remove color on the right, there's tolerance as softness. If we increase tolerance, so what does that mean? So if we want to be less tolerant, it's being hyper specific of that pink. So it's saying, okay, well, Adam, you went to remove some pink, but really in this case, it's only about, I don't know, maybe 10% of the original selection, versus we're saying like, hey, let's be way more tolerant of the pink. Let's almost select nothing. Like you can almost get the entire sky out of this image, but you're also, just due to the fact that this image lacked contrast during the that selection process, then a lot of this tree is also being removed of color as well. Although that is actually super useful. In this case, you can sort of select more of the image by adjusting the tolerance. I haven't really used softness, so let's see what it does. Oh, softness is just an overall, so a more general application of tolerance, but applies to the whole image. If I completely remove softness altogether, you're going to get like almost artifact-like appearances in this case, versus if I maximize it, most of the screen goes black. So you would be able to find sort of an intermediary area where you think that is appropriate. But you can play with these, but again, I think the subject matter is going to be really important here. Does your subject have hard contrasting lines? Are they against a like solid background of a specific color, like pink? Do they have jewelry or something like that that contains the same color of what you're removing? These are things that people in news and stuff like that have been dealing with for like ever since we started using like film. So these are things to keep in mind when you're making your chroma key selections. I'm just going to, in this case, reset and actually remove that from it because I don't necessarily want to remove the pink for that section, but it's how you do it. So that's sort of where I'd like to close off. And maybe the last thing I'd like to touch on is the fact that when we go to export this video, which we can now, let's reduce the size of our tracks here. when we go to export this video, if I had clicked disable, so currently this track is disabled, and you can tell that it's disabled because it's a different color from the rest of the tracks. If I had disabled this track, you would not hear this audio in the background. But the fact that it's locked in this case has nothing to do with the final export. So when you lock something, it means you can't interact with it. But when you hide something, it means that it's hidden for the purpose of exporting it. So if I didn't want to hear this audio track in the background, I would click disable track. And then when I go to export the file, I would only experience either the visual or any other track that was not enabled or disabled. So we'll save our track one more time, and we'll go to produce and share. And then from the production aspect of it, I mean, output could be AVI. The output format in this case is generally just MP4 is fairly good. We have MOV, M4V, WebM, GIF, and MP4 or MP3 rather. So MP3 obviously audio only. You could also just move to a YouTube, or you could share to Vimeo directly from ACDSee Video Studio 4. And then you could suggest the video frame size, which you can adjust here, but you can also adjust by clicking on the frame size from this section here, which is going to affect obviously your production. And then these are fairly simple adjustments, but it gives you the codec and then the audio codec, and then you could go through the process of next to export your file. So if I wanted to, you could also use Video Studio 4 to create a GIF. I would not create a GIF of a full production length, like 2-minute long section like this. GIFs would be for something that would be very short, maybe at most a couple seconds. But if you wanted to, you can create it from ACDSee, which is very new. Yeah, and then that you would go through the process. You could maybe potentially reduce the size. You could go down to 720p if you wanted, or up to a different video framing, and produce from there. So yeah, hopefully that helps you with ACDSee Video Studio 4. I mean, we covered a lot of things. The purpose of this workshop today was to really talk and to touch base on sort of the practical application of the tools, and to give you an idea how I personally use Video Studio 4 for the purpose of making tutorial videos, which I do for ACDSee super regularly. So from the standpoint of recording media to actually like multi-track editing and that sort of thing, you can do all of that within ACDSee Video Studio 4. And yeah, we're pretty excited and happy to announce that there's a lot of changes that have been really beneficial to this release, that it make it more in line with more like full production value movie editing and video editing software. So yeah, anyway, that's the workshop today. I'd like to thank you guys for popping in and watching. And I would also extend that if you do need to contact me, if you have any questions, please email me. My email is aprice@acdsystems.com. So you can find me there. I just added it to the chat panel. And yeah, give me a shout. I answer everybody's questions. If I don't know the answer to your specific questions, I ask the developers, who are literally a room over. So yeah, if you have any questions, please email me. I'd be happy to contact you.